The cold grip of oppression had held humanity in its suffocating grasp for far too long. In the years that had passed since the alien occupation began, the once bustling cities of Earth had turned into shadowed ruins. Skyscrapers that once gleamed in the sunlight now stood as hollow monuments, their glass shattered, their steel skeletons rusting away. The alien invaders, known as the Eckler, had come without warning, their massive ships blotting out the sun, their weapons overwhelming Earth's defenses with terrifying precision. Humanity had resisted, but it had been a futile effort. The Eckler were simply too powerful, their technology far beyond anything Earth's finest minds could fathom. They took what they wanted, resources, land, human for labor, and crushed any resistance beneath their boots. Yet, even in the darkest days, there were those who refused to give in, who believed that no force, no matter how great, could ever truly subjugate the human spirit. Among those who dared to fight back was Captain Idris Hawk, a former naval officer and one of the few survivors of the Resistance's initial defeat. Idris had witnessed the fall of his comrades and the despair that had swept through the remnants of humanity. But unlike so many others, Idris never stopped believing. He knew that the key to overcoming the Eckler wasn't brute force. It was ingenuity. The war had begun with weapons of overwhelming power. But as the years wore on, as humanity adapted, something new began to stir in the remnants of the Resistance. The Eckler might have had superior technology, but they had one critical flaw. They underestimated human adaptability, creativity, and the drive to never surrender. Over time, the Resistance had begun to turn this flaw into an advantage. From salvaged alien tech and old human ingenuity, they had crafted new weapons, cloaking devices, makeshift drones, and unorthodox tactics that had caught the Eckler off guard more than once. Idris stood before the holomap, his fingers brushing the interface as he zoomed in on the coordinates of the latest Eckler stronghold. It was a fortress, guarded by dozens of their ships, perched on the edge of a dead world that was once a thriving human colony. They called it New Arcadia, a place where Earth's best minds had been relocated to serve the Eckler's needs. Idris' mission was simple: infiltrate, sabotage, and free those who were imprisoned. But the stakes were much higher than that. The Eckler had discovered something deep within the Earth's core, something that would change the tide of the war forever if they could harness it. Idris couldn't allow them to succeed. "Captain!" A voice called out from behind him. Idris turned to see Lena, the Resistance's tech genius, stepping forward. She was short, but her sharp eyes and quick thinking had earned her the title of the most brilliant mind left on Earth. Her face was tired, but the spark in her eyes never faded. "We finished assembling the prototype," she said, her voice low. "It's ready for testing." Idris raised an eyebrow. "The cloaking device?" "Not just that," Lena replied, pulling up a set of blueprints on the screen. "It's a fusion of both alien and human technology. We've adapted an Eckler power core to power our own weapon systems. If we can get close enough, we'll be able to disable their defenses without them even knowing we're there." Idris studied the schematics. The device was a masterpiece of design, a patchwork of human invention and salvaged Eckler technology that could turn the tide of the mission. But there were risks. The Eckler's tech was unstable, and even Lena's brilliant mind couldn't guarantee the fusion would hold. If the core malfunctioned, it could take out half the Resistance. "We can't afford failure," Idris said, his voice hard. "We won't fail," Lena replied confidently, but there was a hint of hesitation in her eyes. She wasn't sure either, but she believed in their cause, and in Idris. "I've made some adjustments. The device will work, but we'll need the team in position before we activate it." Idris nodded. "Then we move fast. The longer we wait, the more likely the Eckler will find out what we're up to." Lena handed him a small data chip. "This contains a layout of New Arcadia. The intel is from our last mission. They've added extra layers of security, but we can still infiltrate if we time it right. I've uploaded the cloaking device protocols to the ship system as well." Idris slipped the chip into his pocket and turned toward the door. "Get ready, Lena. We launch at midnight." The team was gathered around the table, the faint glow of their faces illuminating the dimly lit room. Their mission was dangerous, and they all knew it, but the stakes were higher than ever. Each person in the room was a soldier in a war that had already cost humanity so much. But they hadn't given up. They were here because they still believed in the impossible. Idris looked around at their faces. Lena, the brilliant mind who had saved them countless times with her tech, Jace, the former Special Forces operative who had survived the brutal occupation by sheer will, and finally Maria, the sharpshooter whose accuracy was unmatched and who kept the team alive through more close calls than anyone cared to count. "We've trained for this," Idris said, his voice steady, though he could feel the weight of the upcoming mission pressing down on him. "Tonight, we take the fight to the heart of the enemy. New Arcadia is where the Eckler are keeping humanity's best minds. We need to shut it down and free the prisoners. But we're not just fighting for freedom. We're fighting for the future." There was silence for a moment, and then Jay spoke, his voice low and filled with resolve. "I don't care what it takes. We do this for Earth." The others nodded in agreement. They knew the mission was dangerous, and they knew the odds were stacked against them. But if they didn't act now, humanity would never have a chance. The Eckler had taken everything from them, but they hadn't taken their hope. Not yet. Idris stood up, looking at his team. "Let's move out. The clock is ticking." They all stood, their faces set with determination. Each one of them knew that this mission was not just about breaking through the Eckler's defenses. It was about proving to themselves and the rest of the galaxy that humanity was not a race to be enslaved. They had fought for their freedom before, and now they would fight again, not just for survival, but for the chance to reclaim their place among the stars. As they made their way to the launch bay, the hum of the engines filled the air. The ship, the Hope's Dawn, was humanity's last chance to turn the tide. Inside its cold metal walls, the Resistance's ingenuity had made it a formidable weapon, but the real power lay in the hands of the people who flew it. Idris looked out of the ship's viewport as the night sky of Earth faded away behind them. The mission ahead was uncertain, and the risks were high. But one thing was clear. Humanity's fight for freedom was far from over. And tonight, they would unleash everything they had. The Hope's Dawn slipped silently through the atmosphere of Earth, the hum of its engines the only sound that punctuated the quiet. Inside, the Resistance team prepared for the mission ahead, their faces tense but resolute. The time for hesitation had long passed. They had crossed the threshold into the unknown, and now there was no turning back. New Arcadia awaited them. Lara Kane stood at the cockpit, her eyes locked on the darkening expanse of space ahead. The stars seemed distant, unreachable. Yet they were closer than ever. The Hope's Dawn was humanity's last chance to strike at the heart of their oppressors, the Eckler. They had taken the human spirit, twisted it, and forced it into a shape that suited their needs. But the resistance was rising, and tonight the tide of the war would change. "Captain," Lena's voice came through the comms, breaking her focus. "We're approaching the perimeter of New Arcadia space. The cloaking device is online and stable. We're good to go." Lara nodded and pressed a button on the console, activating the ship's stealth mode. The ship's hull shimmered briefly before becoming virtually invisible to the naked eye, blending into the vast void of space. It was their only chance to approach the stronghold undetected. They couldn't afford to be seen. Not yet. "Activate the signal jammer," Lara ordered, her voice low. "We don't need their sensors picking up our presence before we're in position." "We're on it," Jace replied from the comm station. "We've got a blackout on their radar for the next 30 minutes. After that, we need to move fast." Lara turned toward the rest of the crew, her eyes lingering on the faces of those she had fought beside for so long. Each one of them had sacrificed everything. Every one of them carried the weight of humanity's future on their shoulders. Everyone knows their roles. "Stick to the plan. In and out." "We only have one shot at this," Lara said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. The Hope's Dawn glided toward the dense fields of asteroids surrounding New Arcadia, a natural defense that would make their approach even more difficult. The Eckler had set up a perimeter of ships and drones, but the Resistance had carefully studied every piece of intelligence they could gather. The cloaking device and signal jamming would give them a brief window of invisibility, but the window was closing fast. "We got 15 minutes to breach the outer defenses," Lena said, her voice filled with the intensity of the mission ahead. "Once we get through, we'll need to bypass their automated turrets. They've upgraded their system since last time." Lara nodded again, her eyes narrowing. "We're not stopping, no matter what." The asteroid field loomed ahead, its massive rocks like silent sentinels in the dark. The Hope's dawn weaved through them with ease, its sensors feeding data to Artemis, who guided the ship with pinpoint accuracy. The ship's movements were smooth, quiet, too quiet. As they drew closer to the heart of New Arcadia, Lara's mind wandered for just a moment. It had been years since she had seen Earth's surface, since she had stood on solid ground, feeling the warmth of the sun. But those days felt like a lifetime ago. The Earth she remembered was gone, burned by the Eckler's ruthless forces. She pushed the thoughts aside. The future, their future, lay in the hands of this mission. They had to succeed. Initiating bypass, Lena said. I'm hacking into their external security grid now. This is going to take a few minutes, so hold tight. Lara turned to the rest of the crew. Jace was checking his weapons. Maria was securing ammunition, and the rest of the team was preparing for the breach. It would be a bloody fight, no matter how well they planned. The Eckler didn't go down easily. A loud, sharp beep echoed across the comms. Lena's voice broke the silence. Got it. The first wave of defenses is down. We have a clear path to the base. But we need to keep moving. There's a limited window before they patch the breach. All units, prepare for deployment. Lara ordered, standing tall. We move in 5. Lena sent final command, and the Hope's dawn lurched slightly as it powered down its cloaking mode. They were visible now, but they had made it past the first hurdle. The rest would be up to the team on the ground. The ship shuddered as they entered the base's atmosphere, descending toward the planet's surface. From the viewport, Lara could see the massive spires of New Arcadia rising in the distance, gleaming like a fortress of isolation. It was a symbol of the Eckler's dominance, a place where Earth's greatest minds had been imprisoned to work for their alien overlords. As they neared the landing zone, Jay spoke, his voice tense. We've got a problem. Enemy forces are deploying from the interior. We're going to need a diversion to get to the central control hub. Lara didn't hesitate. We'll provide the diversion. Lena, you and Jace will breach the security tower. The rest of us will head for the control hub. We'll buy you time. Lena and Jace nodded in unison, and the rest of the team readied their gear, checking weapons and ensuring everything was in place. The ship touched down with a soft thud, and the hatch opened, revealing the harsh, cold expanse of New Arcadia. The air was thick with tension, but there was something else too, an energy, a spark of hope that had been buried for far too long. Today, they were not the oppressed. They were the ones who would strike back. Lara looked at her team, the weight of leadership settling heavily on her shoulders. Let's move out. The team deployed quickly, moving to the shadows of New Arcadia's outer structures, their footsteps silent as they approached their targets. Every turn, every moment counted. The Eckler were no fools. They had resources and personnel that would make this mission incredibly difficult. But the Resistance had a secret weapon, human ingenuity. It was something the Eckler could never predict. They approached the first checkpoint. The Eckler's automated sentries stood motionless, their mechanical eyes scanning the area for any sign of intrusion. But Lena's hacks had taken down the initial security measures, leaving the sentries blind to the team's movements. They slipped past, using the cover of darkness to their advantage. Almost there, Maria whispered, her voice tight. We've got to be ready for what's inside. Lara nodded. Stay sharp. We've come this far. We're not backing down now. The control hub was just ahead. If they could take it, the Eckler's hold on New Arcadia would be shattered. But Lara knew they couldn't afford to underestimate their enemy. The battle ahead would be fierce, and they had only one chance to get it right. Lara drew her weapon, checking her team one last time before they made their move. On my signal, we take the control hub. They approached the door to the hub. The air was thick with anticipation. Ready, Jay said, his voice steady. Now, Lara commanded. With that, they burst through the door, charging forward into the heart of the Eckler stronghold. The control hub was a vast chamber, illuminated by a cold, sterile light. Rows of consoles and flickering holographic screens lined the walls, each displaying streams of data that no human should have been able to comprehend. The hum of alien technology filled the room, and the air was thick with the scent of machinery, unnatural, metallic, and oppressive. Lara took a moment to scan the area, her eyes searching for the key to the mission. The main control console. It was positioned in the center of the room, encased in a glass-like structure, guarded by a network of Eckler soldiers. "Targets in sight," Maria whispered, her voice barely audible. She stood behind Lara, her sniper rifle aimed at one of the Eckler guards standing near the console. "We need to disable their systems without triggering a full alarm," Lara said. "We don't have much time." Lena and Jace moved swiftly, their silent steps betraying the practiced ease with which they navigated hostile environments. Lena had her hands poised over a portable data console, her eyes darting between screens and her fingers flying over the controls. She was the key to accessing the Eckler's core network, human ingenuity at its finest. Lara's pulse quickened as they moved closer to the control console. The Eckler soldiers didn't seem to notice them yet, too focused on the incoming data streaming across their own screens. The moment they reached the console, the clock would start ticking, and the full weight of the Eckler security would descend upon them. "Almost in," Lena muttered, her voice tense with concentration. "I just need access to their central grid." "Hold tight." Suddenly, the softness of the room was interrupted by a loud, metallic clank. One of the soldiers turned around, his eyes narrowing as he spotted the movement. "Intruders!" he shouted, pulling a weapon from his belt. The alarm sounded almost instantly, a high-pitched shriek that echoed through the entire facility, a warning that would alert every Eckler within a mile radius. The control hub security system activated, locking down all exits and triggering the activation of defensive barriers that had been designed to contain intruders. In that moment, everything changed. "Now!" Lara barked. The team sprang into action. Maria's sniper rifle crackled as the first shot rang out, hitting the Eckler guard square in the chest. He crumpled to the floor without a sound, his body slumping forward. But the others reacted immediately, drawing their weapons and raising the alarms. "Shut it down, Lena," Jace yelled, his voice rising over chaos. He was already charging forward, weaving between the pillars to take out two more Eckler soldiers who had attempted to flank them. Lena's fingers flew across her console, desperately trying to breach the control grid. "I'm almost there. I need just a few more seconds." "We don't have seconds," Lara shouted back, pulling out her blaster and taking down another soldier who had tried to charge at them from the right. "Move, move, move." The sound of combat filled the air, a constant barrage of shots and screams. Eckler soldiers flooded the room, but Lara and her team fought with everything they had, knowing that this was their only chance. The hopes Dawn and their mission had brought them here, but their survival hinged on securing this control hub. Lena was still working furiously, her face etched with sweat. She froze. "Done. Systems disabled. We've got control over the defenses now." A surge of relief ran through Lara's veins. "Great. Jace, cover the exits. We'll hold them here while Lena gets the data we need." Jace nodded, already taking up position near one of the doors. He fired a few quick shots at the advancing soldiers, forcing them to take cover. Maria, on the other hand, was steady, her sniper rifle cutting through the chaos, picking off enemies one by one. As Lena continued to hack into the Eklund network, a low rumble shook the room, and the floor beneath them seemed to tremble. The entire facility was on lockdown. The sound of reinforced doors sealing and shields activating made it clear that the Eckler were preparing for a final push. "They're bringing reinforcements," Lena said, her voice tight. "We got about 2 minutes before we're overwhelmed." "Not good enough," Lara muttered. Her gaze snapped to Maria. "Can you hold the door while we finish this?" Maria's lips curled into a grim smile. "I'll give them a reason to stay away." Lara turned back to Lena. "We need the coordinates of every human prisoner on this base. That's our priority. Everything else can wait." Lena was typing at lightning speed, her eyes flicking between the control panels. "I'm getting the location data now." "But there's something else," she said, her voice faltering for just a moment. "There's a blueprint of the Eckler's next-generation weapon systems. It's in the same database. We could use it against them." Lara paused, her mind calculating. "Do it, but only if we can use it without getting ourselves killed. Send the data to the ship." "Sending now." Lena's fingers danced over the console, and a new series of codes appeared on the screen. Suddenly, a sharp crack from the entrance drew Lara's attention. The first wave of reinforcements had arrived. They were fast, their armor thick and impenetrable. It wouldn't be long before they realized that the resistance was not just another group of survivors to be wiped out. They were something different. They were a force driven by a singular purpose: to take back their world. Get to the extraction point. Lara shouted, grabbing the data chip from Lena's hands and slipping it into her jacket. We have what we need. Time to move. The team regrouped, quickly pushing their way through Control Hub, keeping their pace fast but steady. The Eckler soldiers were relentless, but they could sense the desperation in the air. The resistance was close to victory, and that meant the Eckler were about to make their final attempt to crush them. Lara could hear the distant echoes of their enemy, growing louder by the second. They were not going to let them leave. Not alive, at least. Jace, Lara called as they rounded a corner. Can you get us through the tunnels? Already ahead of you, Jace replied, already hacking into a nearby terminal to disable the last of the Eckler's defenses in the hallway. Lena and Maria were already on high alert, scanning their surroundings for any sign of the Eckler's approach. The sound of metal feet against metal grew louder, and the unmistakable screech of a door opening signaled that their time was running out. We're out of time, Lena said, her voice strained. If we don't move now, we'll be trapped here. Lara nodded. Move fast, everyone. We get to the ship, and we don't stop. With a final burst of speed, the team ran toward the extraction point. The sound of alien fire filled the air behind them, but they didn't stop. Not when they had come so far. Not when humanity's future depended on them. They reached the ship's landing zone, their escape already in motion. The Hope's Dawn was waiting for them, its engines firing as it hovered just above the ground. Get in, Jace shouted, waving them aboard. The team scrambled up the ramp, adrenaline pushing them forward. Lara took one last look at the facility as the ramp closed behind them. The battle for New Arcadia was far from over, but they had made a significant step forward. They had secured the data, disabled the Eckler's defenses, and most importantly, given humanity hope. As the Hope's Dawn rose into the sky, Lara looked at her team, her voice full of purpose. This is only the beginning, she said. We fight for our freedom, and we'll keep fighting until it's ours again. The Hope's Dawn tore through the atmosphere of New Arcadia, its engines burning brightly as they broke free from the planet's orbit. The Eckler fortress was left behind, now just a fading memory in the rear view. But as the stars outside the ship's windows turned into endless black, a sense of urgency weighed heavily on Lara's shoulders. This mission was only the first step. The data they had obtained was invaluable, but it was also dangerous. The Eckler were ruthless, and the war they had begun was far from over. Captain, Lena's voice crackled over the comms, her tone urgent. I've decrypted part of the weapon system data. It's worse than we thought. The Eckler are building something, a weapon that could wipe out entire fleets in seconds. Lara's heart sank. She had suspected something of this magnitude, but hearing it confirmed was a hard blow. How close are they to completing it? Closer than we anticipated, Lena replied, a hint of frustration in her voice. They've already constructed a prototype, and they're moving into the final stages. This weapon, if they deploy it, could shift the balance of power in the entire galaxy. They won't stop until it's operational. We can't let that happen, Lara muttered under her breath. Her mind raced as she processed the information. We need to get the rest of the data before they launch it. Lena, what's the next step? I'll keep decrypting, Lena said, her fingers flying over her console. But we need to know the location of their main production facility. I'll work on triangulating the coordinates based on the data we've gathered. We can't risk going in blind. Lara nodded, turning to the rest of her team. Jace, Maria, prepare for the next phase. I want us ready to move the second we have the location. Lena, keep us posted. The crew silently acknowledged the orders, but the tension in the air was palpable. The success of their mission on New Arcadia had given them a foothold, but the true test would come when they confronted the full force of the Eckler military. It was a gamble, and it was one that Lara was willing to take. They couldn't afford to sit idly by while the Eckler refined their weapon of destruction. Humanity had already lost too much, and they had no intention of surrendering any more. Hours passed as the Hope's dawn sped toward their next target, but the feeling of dread still hung in the air. Laura stood by the viewport, staring into the vastness of space. The stars twinkled in the distance, cold and indifferent to the war being waged far below. Earth, the birthplace of humanity, was a shadow now, a distant memory of a time when humans had thrived. But that memory still burned within Laura. It was a flame she wasn't willing to let go of, and she would do anything to reignite it. She had seen the horrors the Eckler had unleashed on Earth, on the colonies, and on the human people. She had seen families torn apart, cities reduced to rubble, and her own people enslaved. The Eckler were not just conquerors, they were exterminators. Captain, Lena's voice broke through her thoughts. I've pinpointed the location of their primary weapons factory. It's located on a moon near the Eckler's homeworld, Norath. It's heavily guarded, but there's a weak spot in their defenses, an old mine shaft system that connects to the factory. It's our only shot at getting inside without being detected. Laura turned from the viewport, her eyes narrowing. How much time do we have? The factory is operating at full capacity, Lena replied, her voice tense. We don't have much longer before they finish their final tests. If we wait too long, the weapon will be deployed before we can stop it. Then we don't wait, Laura said, her voice firm. Prepare for immediate departure. Jace, Maria, gather your gear. We'll hit them hard and fast. Jace gave a grim smile. I like this plan. Maria was already at her station, checking her sniper rifle. We'll make sure they don't know what hit them. The crew quickly gathered their things, each person aware of the stakes. It was no longer just about survival. It was about taking back their future, about proving to the Eckler and to the galaxy that humanity wouldn't be cowed. They had unleashed their ingenuity on New Arcadia, and now it was time to push further, deeper into the heart of Eckler territory. As the Hope's dawn adjusted its course, the ship's engines humming beneath them, Laura took one last look at the starry expanse. She felt the weight of the mission pressing down on her, but she didn't falter. Her crew, her people, needed her, and if there was one thing Laura Hawk knew, it was how to lead them to victory, even against impossible odds. The journey to the moon took several hours, and during that time, the crew focused on final preparations. Lena was busy hacking into the Eckler security grid, accessing their surveillance systems, and mapping out the best approach. Jace was preparing their weapons and explosives, making sure everything was ready for the assault. Maria was checking her gear, making sure her sniper rifle was tuned and ready for a long-range shot if needed. Laura sat in her chair, watching the team work. Each of them was a vital piece of the puzzle. Lena had saved them countless times with her tech skills. Jace was the muscle and strategist. And Maria was the one who could make the impossible shot. Together, they made a formidable team, one that already defied the odds more than once. When the ship reached the moon's atmosphere, the team donned their tactical suits, prepared for the worst. The surface was barren, covered in craters and rock formations, perfect terrain for an ambush. The Hope's dawn hovered above the moon's surface, its cloaking system engaged. "We've got coordinates," Lena said, her eyes glued to the screen. "The mine shaft entrance is just ahead. We'll need to move fast once we're down there." Laura stood up, her eyes locking with each of her team members. "This is it. No more hesitation. We get in, disable the weapon, and get out. Nothing more, nothing less. Let's make it count." With a final nod of agreement, the team moved to the drop zone. The Hope's dawn set down gently on the moon's surface, its landing gear kicking up dust as the hatch opened. The cold air rushed in, carrying with it the scent of desolation. Laura led the way, her heart pounding in her chest. They had come this far. Now it was time to finish it. As they moved through the barren landscape, the eerie silence of the moon weighed heavily on their minds. It was as if the entire universe held its breath, waiting to see if humanity would rise or fall. The mine shaft entrance loomed ahead. Lena quickly accessed the security panel, disabling the lock with ease. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing the dark, cavernous passage inside. Lara took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Let's end this," she whispered, her voice full of determination. With that, they disappeared into the darkness, the future humanity hanging in the balance. The cold, dimly lit corridors of the mine shaft stretched before them like a labyrinth, twisting and turning with each step. The air was stale, thick with dust and the remnants of long-abandoned machinery. But Lara didn't hesitate. She could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on her. The lives of countless humans, their future, all depended on their success here. The team moved swiftly, their footsteps echoing in the silence as they made their way deeper into the moon's surface. Lena led the way, her fingers moving over a small handheld device, hacking into the mine's internal network. "We're almost there. The main factory entrance is through this passageway," Lena whispered, her voice steady but betraying the tension they all felt. Lara scanned their surroundings, the tension in the air palpable. The farther they ventured into the heart of the mine, the more vulnerable they became. There were no distractions here, no way to conceal their movements from an enemy that was sure to arrive soon. The thought of the weapon, an Eckler invention that could obliterate entire fleets, loomed over her mind. If they didn't act swiftly, it could change the course of the war forever. "How much longer, Lena?" Jace asked, his voice low and alert. The sharp clink of his boots on the metal floor rang through the passage, a constant reminder that they were too close to failure. "Almost there. Just a few more yards." Lena's fingers worked faster now, the glow from her screen casting a pale light across her face. "The security systems here are stronger. The Eckler are definitely aware of something, but they haven't pinpointed our exact location yet. Once we breach the central command area, it's a matter of disabling the power grid." Lara felt a flicker of hope rise within her, but she quickly suppressed it. Hope wouldn't win this war. They needed more than that. "Stay sharp," Lara ordered, her voice firm. "We don't know how much longer we have before the Eckler realize we're inside. Jace, Maria, be ready to engage at a moment's notice." Jace grinned, checking the weapons attached to his belt. Always ready. Maria, as ever, remained calm, her sniper rifle cradled in her hands. She glanced at Lara, her eyes focused and unreadable. "I'll cover the rear. If anyone tries to flank us, they won't get far." They continued their approach, each step feeling heavier as the mine tunnel narrowed. Suddenly, the sound of a door sliding open ahead sent a ripple of tension through the team. The passage widened into a massive chamber, a central hub of the Eckler's operation. Lara motioned for them to halt, her breath steadying as she assessed the room. The large chamber was a control center, filled with rows of terminals and communication devices, each one linked to the Eckler's vast network. It was their next obstacle, the place where their mission could either succeed or fail. Lena moved toward the nearest terminal, her fingers already working furiously. "Give me a few seconds to disable their defenses," she murmured. Lara didn't wait. "Jace, Maria, take up positions. Watch for any movement." The two nodded and silently positioned themselves around perimeter, their weapons at the ready. The hum of alien technology filled the room as Lena's device hacked into the system, bypassing the encrypted security layers. The seconds felt like minutes. Lara's mind raced through the possibilities. If Lena could disable the defenses, they would have an opening to reach the core of the Eckler's operation. But if they were too slow... Done! Lena's voice cut through the tension. "The security systems are down. We got access to their weapon schematics." "Good work, Lena," Lara said, her voice unwavering. "Jace, Maria, move in." They moved toward the heart of the control center, the core of the Eckler's weapon project. The closer they got, the stronger the oppressive feeling became. The factory was already operating, the weapon nearing completion. They could feel it, the inevitable clash that was coming. But they would be the ones to control the outcome. Lena stayed behind, quickly transmitting the weapon data back to the Hope's Dawn, ensuring that the intel would reach the ship for analysis and ultimately a strategy. She didn't have much time. Her job was far from over. The team reached a set of reinforced doors that led to the inner sanctum of the facility. Lara knew that once they opened those doors, there would be no turning back. They had to destroy the weapon, and they had to do it fast. "We got company," Maria hissed, her sharp eyes scanning the hallway. multiple Eckler ahead. Lara gestured to Jace, who immediately took cover behind a nearby pillar, his weapon raised. Take them down, but keep it quiet. Without hesitation, Jace stepped out, his rifle booming with precision. Each shot was calculated, and each enemy soldier that fell was one less threat. But the Eckler were a relentless enemy, and they responded quickly. They began to deploy reinforcements. Go now, Lara commanded, moving toward the door with Lena in tow. The door slid open, revealing a vast chamber filled with industrial machinery. In the center stood the core of the Eckler's new weapon, a massive energy reactor that pulsed with deadly force. It was connected to hundreds of cables that snaked across the floor and up into the walls. The weapon wasn't complete yet, but the core was already operational. Lara took one look at it and knew what needed to be done. Lena, get to the power grid. We're going to overload it. Make sure it destroys the weapon completely. Lena nodded, but her face was strained. If we overload it, there's no way we'll be able to get out of here before the explosion. We need to act fast. We will, Lara replied firmly. We don't leave until it's finished. As Lena worked quickly to overload the system, Jace and Maria set up a perimeter around the room, watching for incoming threats. The Eckler forces were closing in, but they would not be fast enough. Lena's hands flew over the console, initiating the shutdown sequence. She paused for a moment, her eyes flickering to the readout. Done. Lena yelled. The reactor is about to go critical. We have 30 seconds. Let's go, Lara shouted, turning to the rest of the team. But before they could make their exit, the door slammed shut with a deafening clang. The Eckler had locked them in. Lara's heart skipped a beat as she heard the hiss of Eckler's soldiers approaching from the other side of the door. We're trapped, Jay said, voice rising with urgency. No, Lara said, her mind working frantically. We'll make it. Move now. The seconds ticked by, and the hum of the reactor grew louder, its pulse intensifying with every passing moment. The team sprinted toward the only exit, but the Eckler were already there, their weapons drawn, prepared to stop them. Lara raised her weapon, determined to go down fighting if need be. We take them out. We move forward. There's no other choice. But just as the first shots were fired, a deafening explosion shook the facility. The reactor had gone critical. The walls trembled, and the entire complex erupted in a blinding light, a shockwave of energy radiating outward. Lara's last thoughts were of her team, of humanity's survival. As the Hope's Dawn soared into space, the battle for freedom had been won, but the war for humanity's future had only just begun.